Okay, today is the 15th day of Av, the 11th, the 19th of August. Okay, so we were talking about the bridges. I didn't have time to look it up, but this is the idea that he's giving, that if you want to span something, you also have to divide it up. And there's no other way to do it. I would imagine that's the general gist of this. So now he says, וכך יובן למעלה עניין עין בית קשרים ובחינת צמצומים במי החסד העליון שלא ימשכו למטה כמו שהם למעלה. So he says the same way we do this below, spanning a bridge, spanning a river with a bridge, so it is above, meaning spiritually, abstractly, that the 72 bridges represent some kind of limiting on the waters of loving kindness. That the loving kindness, we said, it comes from above to below. So that they don't go down as they are above, meaning not with the same force. So, actually, in one of the commentaries that I saw on this, at some point, somebody said this is like a dam. So if you've been to the Hoover Dam, so the whole point is that you stop the water and then it becomes a bridge. So that's taking it to a whole new level. It's completely stopping the water. Here it's not that it's stopping the water altogether, it's just there's less flow. So less flow of loving kindness so that it can come down into our world in a limited way. Because if there was no limitation of the waters of loving kindness, of chesed, and the chesed would just be without end, so there couldn't be our reality. And it's very interesting that one of the main big problems that people have with Hashem is that the world is not perfect. The world is not fully loving kindness. That's what people want it to be. And what he's saying here is that wouldn't be a creation at all. And what you're imagining is the infinite nature of God, the infinite goodness of God. You're imagining that what is infinite above can be contained below. It's not that there can't be a world that would be infinitely good. The problem would be that it wouldn't be our world. Meaning you'd have to give up on a body, you have to give up on a lot of things. And that's basically how people imagine the Garden of Eden, paradise, after the soul goes in the afterlife. So it goes to a place where there's infinite goodness. But if there's infinite goodness, there's also no world. And you can't have both. The whole point of Judaism is that we're building a vessel that can contain, in our reality, that can contain the infinite goodness. That's the point of Judaism. The point of Judaism is that it is possible to build such a thing, but you have to. How do you build such a thing? We said the only vessel that can contain the infinite is Chokhmah, is wisdom. And wisdom is self-nullification. As we defined it yesterday, the correct definition is that wisdom, self-nullification, is accepting Hashem's will here below, doing mitzvot. And the more that a person does this, the more they build a vessel that can contain the infinite goodness. Otherwise, if we're just talking about the way the world is right now, for the world to exist, there has to be a limitation on the loving kindness. And the moment that there is a limitation, so obviously there's a lot of pain and suffering and so on, because it's a limitation of the flow. It can't be something like what was created Ata ביום הראשון מששת ימי בראשית שהאיר החסד העליון ונתאבו ממנו מים ואור שאם היות שניהן נתאבו ממידת החסד מכל זה הרי הם שני בחינות שונות ממש. And another thing that we wouldn't have, and we'll talk a lot more about this later on, is differentiation between different aspects. So on the first day of creation, which is the day of loving kindness, and here we have to introduce this whole topic, that the 6 days of creation correspond to the 6 emotional measures, from loving kindness to foundation, from chesed to yesod. So the first day is chesed, first day is loving kindness. What was created on the first day? 2 things. It says one was the waters, and the other one is the light. How does he know that the water was created? Because we see that the first thing we see is that the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And then God said, let there be light. So the first there was water, and then there was light. This is the order that he says them in. Water is a symbol of loving kindness, of chesed, and so is light. They're both loving kindness. Except that they're different. How could it be that water and light are both loving kindness, but each one is a different aspect of loving kindness? This can only be possible in a limited reality of loving kindness, a limited reality of chesed. If there was no limitation on it, then water and light would be exactly the same thing. וזה נעשה על ידי שמי החסד הנ"ל נמשכו על ידי עין בית קשרים שהם בחינת צמצומים להיות מזה כמה מיני המשכות שונות. So the idea here, like we said, like an old London bridge, is that the water flows in separate channels. So even though it's the waters of loving kindness which are infinite and they can create and so on, but one's flowing here and then another one's flowing there. From here you get water, from here you get light. ובבחינת מידה וגבול להיות התהוות בריאה מוגבלת. ונמצא שהגשרים הם בחינת צמצומים לצמצם האור. So what are the bridges? So again, we thought in the beginning of bridges to connect two things. So he says, really what a bridge is a type of limitation. It's a type of capping of what's flowing, capping the flow. האור והשפע, אך המכוון בהם הוא חסד גמור. But really, why are they still called a bridge? Because the whole point is to be able to let what needs to flow out and reach its destination, except that it needs to slow it down and needs to divide it into different channels. אך הוא נשלם ונגמר לבוא לידי פועל ממש על ידי מידת הגבורה, דייקה, לצמצם האור והחיות. And what's needed here is this limitation put on the infinite flow so that there can be light and life force that is limited, and therefore you can get limited creatures and with the distinction between them. וזהו ששם עין בית החסד יש בו רישות ואותיות שהוא בגימטריה גבורה. And when you even look at this name, we said it's not really 72, it's 72 triplets. So altogether 72 times 3 is 216. 216 is the gematria, is the value, the numerical value of the word gvura, of might. And so he says it's even built into it, meaning that if it was really just a name of 72 letters, you could say this was pure chesed. But it's not just 72 letters, it's 72 triplets. So altogether 216. From the first, that we said there's 3 verses in Beshalach, Vayavo, Vayet, so each one is 72 letters, so altogether we have 216. Mishum shu or chesed b'kli agvura. And here again the idea is that it's 72 triplets, so each one is chesed, but in the vessel of might. Just like we have in the second parsha, the second paragraph of the Shema. We have another example of this. Another example in the Gemara, in Masechet Ta'anit, is that rain is called the mighty rain. Gvurot kshamim, or rain that is mighty. Why do we say this? Because when God brings the rain down, He doesn't bring down, like if you've ever seen a, let's call it, if you've ever seen like a tanker, a super tanker, throw its water out to stop a forest fire. So you see this sheet, huge sheet of water coming down. Rain never comes down like that. Never. How is that? That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing that it's dropping.
Right. And it's drops. So each drop is to make the rain first more usable by the inhabitants of the earth. Otherwise, it would drown everything. And so, and it says that that was exactly what happened in Noah's flood. That God prepared the amount of rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And if they would have done tshuva, they would have repented, then that would have come down as rain of blessing. What is rain of blessing? It would have come down as drops. And as much as it can flood a little, but it's still, the world doesn't go underwater because of drops of water. What ended up happening was that it came down as a sheet. All 40 days and 40 nights came down all at once. And then it continued to rain. It was more. But first of all, everything came down in one moment, and that drowns everything. So rain itself is called the rain of might. So on the one hand, rain is loving kindness. It's chesed. It's the sustenance of life. It's what allows life on earth to exist. On the other hand, it comes down in drops. It comes down in a limited version of itself. Each time a little bit. And each drop causes, in fact, many discussions in the Gemara and Tainis about how the drops are needed to irrigate the land. That if you don't have, in fact, the best type of rain, the best type of hydration is when it's not even drops, when it's a mist. When it comes down as tiny, minuscule droplets. And it's even hanging in the air. And they say that does much more for the earth than anything else. There's a Gemara there that says this. שהרי אם היה שטף כמו ארובות השמיים נפתחו בימי המבול לא היה גידול התבואה כלל. Because if it would have come down in a sheet like it did during the flood, then there would be no growth from the earth. The earth would not be able to tolerate this amount of water. וזהו שאמר משה רבנו עליו השלום בפרשה הזו ונתתי מטר. Now he turns, this is in our parsha. The second parsha of Shema is in Parashat Eikev. In chapter 11, it's in Chamishi, I think. And there we have Moshe Rabbeinu saying an amazing thing. He says, I will bring down rain. But he says it in the first person. And you have to remember, Moshe is speaking. These are speeches that he's making. He's not saying what Hashem told him to say even. He's saying what he wants to say, and then Hashem told him, this is what you should write down as the fifth book of the Torah. How can Moshe Rabbeinu say, I will bring down rain? What do you mean, I will bring down? He should have said, Hashem will bring down rain. I wanted to spend time, we don't have time today, maybe we'll do it tomorrow. I want to spend time talking about the different voices, the three different voices used in the Chumash. Maybe we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But in any case, so Moshe is saying, I will bring down the rain. How can you say something like that? You should have said, God will bring down rain. The reason is, he says, ולא נזכר כלשון הזה בכל התורה שאומר ונתתי. גם דשכינה מדברת מתוך גרונו. Even though the Shechina is speaking from his throat, meaning he's saying the words of God. Later God is going to tell him, this is what I wanted you to say. So turn this into the fifth book of the Torah. Nonetheless, he shouldn't say, I'm going to bring down the rain. He should say, Hashem is going to bring down the rain. אלא לפי שפרשת שמע קדמה לבעיה עם שמוע, והיה לו מסירות נפש בפרשת שמע, והרי אינו כלום, רק הגילוי אלוקות שבו, לכך אמר ונתתי וכולו. So, what happened here? He first said Shema. Shema he said in last week's parsha, in V'eschanan. What is Shema, we said? Shema, we said, is completely leaving one's body. It's becoming completely, absolutely dedicated to God. It's connecting completely with God, forgetting the body behind, forgetting myself behind. It's pure. It's the closest thing to what people mean when they say nullification. That there's no I at all. There's nothing left. That's not what we call bittul, but it's a state of there not being anything. He calls it here eino klum. He doesn't call it bittul. He calls it eino klum. You're nothing. You become nothing. How do I become nothing? We said that the whole point of the Shema is for me to rise above where Hashem has no name, to get to that source. So that source, there's no me anymore. It doesn't exist. Bittul, like in Vayayim Shema, in the second parsha, means that I'm taking on Hashem's will. So there has to be an I. If there's no I, who's taking that will on? But in the first parsha, especially in the first verse, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, there's no I at all. There's nothing left. We don't even address ourselves. Right? Right. So they heard this. Right. Okay. So we go through this every day now. We first say Shema Yisrael, we become like nothing, and then when we take on the yoke of heaven and do the mitzvot and bring down the rain, it becomes like we're doing it. That's what he's saying here. Because before there was no you, there was no I. So who's now bringing down the rain? So he says, we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu that he was so nothing at that moment that afterwards when he says, and the rain is going to come down, he says, I'm going to bring down the rain, because he's completely identifying with Hashem. He's so identified with Hashem that's the same thing. That is the level we're waiting. There's a v'chulu here, which is a little bit important. We'll see it tomorrow because it's more connected actually to the next chapter, chapter 16. But we can leave it the way it is here. So just to remember this, in the first parsha, I completely nullify myself to the point that I don't exist. That's the point of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. In the second parsha, Vayayim Shamua, if you do Hashem's will, Vayayim Shamua, if you listen, like our parsha, Ekev Tishmeun, if you listen.
It's me, because it's not you.
Sorry?
I can't say me, even Natati means Moshe Rabbeinu, because he's
No, Natati is Hashem. But I call it me. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, and we have to feel the same way. So in other words, when I'm putting on tefillin, who's putting on tefillin? Hashem's putting on tefillin. Okay? If I do that, that's why the Shema is in the tefillin. Because it's a mitzvah that the person should feel that, like Chazal say in Brachos, that just as we have tefillin, Hashem has tefillin. He doesn't tell us to do anything that He doesn't do Himself. What do we mean by that? Hashem puts on tefillin. What we mean to say is that when we put on the tefillin, it's like Hashem is putting on the tefillin. That's the depth of it. That's what Chazal really mean. They mean to say, when you do this, it's like Hashem did this. Now, there's a ton to speak about. But I'll just say one word. You know Rami Antian, right? So Rami Antian overstepped the boundaries. And I'm not saying that anything happened to him because of that. But when he was teaching in the 80s in Crown Heights, he kept saying this. You are God. And that you can't say. Why can't you say that? Because the moment you say you finished. The moment there's a you can't say you're God. That's already idolatry. The whole point here is these are things that can't really be said. They're very delicate. So you can't say them, but you have to say them at some level. So here we're learning it. We're not saying it. And we're saying that this has to do with doing mitzvot. When a person is doing a mitzvah, not some when he's sitting here and enjoying himself, eating a good meal. When I'm doing a mitzvah, the feeling should be that I don't exist, it's Hashem doing the mitzvah. Then that's getting into character.
That's getting
into character. But when you're doing it. Okay, so we'll speak more about this tomorrow.